My name is Emily Johnson. I'm 25. And the first thing you should know about me is that I learned early how to hold my face still while the ground opens beneath my feet. It's a skill like any other acquired, tested, refined though. I never thought I'd need it on a night thick with perfume and nostalgia. Under a ceiling strung with fairy lights the color of champagne. I didn't plan the line about sharks. I didn't practice the little tilt of my head, the soft smile that says I know more than I'm letting on. I only knew that when my sister's laugh sliced across the country club ballroom, and heads turned toward us the way sunflowers follow light. The mask slid on as if it had been waiting for this very hour. Still single, she asked, voice sugared and loud enough to ripple through the crowd like a dropped glass. Her dress was the exact red of emergency exit signs, and her hair fell in the careful waves she used to cut from magazines and scotch tape to our shared mirror. Back when we still argued about whose turn it was to braid whose, she'd always wanted a life that glowed. It wasn't enough to be loved, she needed to be seen being loved. I didn't answer. My fingers found my phone in the pocket of my slate gray blazer, the one that fits me like I grew the bones for it. Are you here yet, love? I whispered, barely moving my lips. I didn't look at the screen to check for a response. I didn't need one. The timing had been planned to the minute, down to the valet's route and the soft beep of the black car's hazard lights when it turned into the drive. I only slipped the phone back and lifted my eyes to my sister's. Her name is Mara. There was a time when we were to halves of the same dare. Jump off the dock at midnight, steal the neighbors' plums and spit the pits at the moon, swap sweaters without asking and secrets without thinking. There was a time when she was the one who held my face after our father forgot another birthday. After our mother's smile went blank as a TV with a bent antenna. There was a time before the ring. The ring fine gold, a single oval diamond steadied by 6 prongs came on a Tuesday in early spring, the kind of day when the air says maybe. I was 19 and living above a bakery that kneaded mornings into something soft and edible. I had an internship at a tech company in the city, answering emails and returning borrowed lanyards to a drawer no one else seemed to notice. The founder, his name was Ian Archer. You've probably read it on lists. Stopped by my cubicle to ask if I'd found the right address for a venture fund in Palo Alto. He stared at the post-it I'd written on, then at my face, like both held an answer to a question he hadn't allowed himself to phrase out loud. We were an unlikely pair and didn't care. I knew what people whispered. She's a pretty intern. He's a self-made millionaire who doesn't know his own hungry. But every night he cooked me simple things: garlic, tomatoes, eggs, and we ate on the floor because we never remembered to buy chairs. And he traced plans into my wrist with his fingertip. Ideas he would never ship without testing and truths he would test without mercy. He asked me once what I wanted if I could rid the wanting of anyone else's voice. I told him, a room of my own and work that makes my hands feel necessary. He laughed and said, that's 2 rooms, Emily, the one with walls and the one inside your chest. The ring came in a box the exact color of the afternoon sky. I said yes because standing with him in a courtyard swollen with wisteria felt like standing inside a vow the world wanted for us. I didn't hear the door across the hall open. I didn't see my sister's eyes catch the shine through our thin curtains. I was so busy imagining an altar made of sentences we would say and mean and protect that I forgot one thing. Mara never wanted what she had. She wanted what I wanted. Especially if I had it first. What happened next wasn't cinematic. There was no thundered confession. No scene you can queue up on a streaming service and screenshot to send a friend. There were small moves. Mara started showing up at the office with coffee for me and one for Ian since I was there anyway. She asked him questions like she was solving an equation. With his name in the variables, she listened the way she used to listen to our mother's voice through a bedroom wall, intense, tilted, taking. She laughed at jokes he hadn't told yet. She found reasons to be in the places he went. The city isn't big when you're hungry. I didn't see it as theft at first. The world had trained me to call it what it wasn't: sisterly help, good timing, a natural overlap of friends and errands. Besides, love makes an editing room out of your skull. It cuts out the frames that don't fit the story you're paying to believe. By the time I realized Mara was playing a different movie, my life had already been recast. Ian called me from a number I didn't recognize. He said the words slowly, as if the air between us were thick, as if sound had to shove its way through. "I'm sorry," he said. "I think your sister needs me more," as if need were a noble currency. As if people who break glass get extra water because they're cut. I learned that day how to stand very still while a door closed so softly. It sounded like the house sighing. I learned that day that love is not a courtroom where evidence wins. It's a tide, and sometimes the tide takes your name with it. I left the bakery apartment the next morning. I returned the ring to my pocket and then to a pawn shop, where a man with ash on his sleeve looked at me as if he were counting. I took the cash and bought solitude, a studio near the river, a desk, a used laptop with the letters worn off the keys, a coffee maker that hissed like a warning. If you asked me what I did for the next 2 years, I would tell you I built. When you've lost a person, you can lose yourself, or you can build something that makes losing you a rare possibility. I chose the second. I studied at night. I wrote code in the mornings until my hands ached. I built a small product to solve a small problem and then found a person whose problem it was, and sold it to them for a small amount that felt big enough to get me to the next week. I did this until small multiplied and clarified, until the thing I was making started making me. People call me lucky now when they want to erase what I did to make my luck look like it loved me first, but I don't care what they call it. I track the progress in other units. The first time a customer I didn't know emailed me to say that their team finished work before sunset for the first time in a year because of the tool we built. The day I hired a woman whose resume read like a fight, and she cried in the bathroom when she realized health insurance was real. The night I stood on a rooftop and counted every light in the building across the street and thought, we did that. We kept people at desks they loved under lamps they chose. It was enough. And then my high school reunion happened. In a room with a floor so glossy everyone walked like their feet were mirrors. I went because I'd stopped running from ghosts and decided to inventory them. The invitation promised artisanal cocktails and a photo booth where you could choose props to pretend you were a version of yourself who always had the right hat. I dressed like a woman who had nothing to fear: black trousers, gray blazer, white camisole, soft as an apology I would never again offer to freely. I wore my hair in a low knot, and my grandmother's pearl studs, the ones Mara said were too classic to be interesting. I wanted to look like a sentence with a period at the end. Mara was already at the bar when I arrived. A semicircle of faces tilted toward her like satellites around something with heat. She had married Ian after a year. There had been photos. A venue with glass walls, sparklers so bright it looked like midnight, confessing to noon, and then divorced him a year later, in a settlement whose numbers were never spoken but often guessed. After that, she dated men who owned things: car dealerships, parts of sports teams, the ability to make waiters remember their names. She collected wallets the way other people collect art. I used to think that meant she collected men. It took me too long to see she was really collecting doors to rooms where she believed love waited. If she could only get the light right. Still single, she asked now, and the crowd did what crowds do. It took a step back to see better. Some of them recognized my name from a funding announcement last fall. It turns out that if you build a company that builds time for other companies, people who track time for money tend to notice you. People pretended not to overhear. People are generous that way. I let the words hang. Let them become a chandelier between us. Let the light sting. There are many kinds of silence. There is a stunned silence, a sulky one, a silence that begs to be broken in the exact place it's weakest. The silence I made now was a room I built where I could watch her measure herself against what she just tried to make me feel. Her eyes flicked from my face to my hands, as if she were looking for a ring I might have hidden somewhere less obvious. I felt a tenderness for her that startled me. The kind you feel for someone watching the end of a movie they didn't know they weren't at all. I tapped my phone. "Are you here yet, love?" The word came out easy. It had been living in my mouth all week, warming the place where I used to keep my tongue pressed against my teeth whenever I saw Mara's name in print. I slipped the phone away. I kept my shoulders soft. I turned slightly so the room could see both of us in the same frame. "I should tell you about him, about the person to whom the word love belonged. I met him neither in an office nor a myth. He was not the richest man in any room, and he never tried to be. His name is Rowan, and he came to me the way good weather comes, not with trumpets, but with a kind of clarity you only recognize after you realize. You can suddenly see the distance between things. He was an engineer who wrote poetry in the margins of data sheets. He once fixed a cracked mug with gold lacquer because he believed broken things should advertise their history. He never asked me to be smaller to make space for him. He asked me to be exact. We built something that wasn't a company. We built mornings that made us both ambitious in the same direction. He didn't arrive to rescue me. I had stopped believing in rescues. He arrived to stand where I was standing and say, "If you want, we could stand here together." I said yes, because the room in my chest is big, but it is not infinite. And I wanted to fill it with someone who thought square footage wasn't the point. Outside, the circular drive swallowed headlights and returned them as thin coins of light on the ballroom's windows. I knew the black car was coming before any of us heard it. You can feel inevitability the way you feel thunder before it learns its name. I watched Mara's breath hesitate. She had always loved an entrance, but she didn't know how to share one. I thought, not for the first time, that the story we tell about victory is usually too simple. We imagine it as a door we slam shut behind us. But victory isn't a door. It's a bridge away to cross the same river you once swore would drown you, and then to turn so others can cross too, even the ones who pushed you in, especially them. The air shifted, conversations faltered, the black car slid to a stop at the curb with the confident ease of a sentence that already knows its verb. The driver stepped out and moved around to the passenger side, the window lowered halfway. Mara took 2 steps back as if someone had placed a mirror in front of her, and the reflection was older than she thought possible. For a breath long enough to measure, her face went bare, the paint wiped clean, the angles unarmed. She touched the notch at her throat where her pulse lived and whispered, "It's you." The room, greedy for drama, leaned forward. I kept my face still. I kept my hands loose at my sides. The mask didn't feel like a mask anymore. It felt like skin. The face in the window was older than the one from the wedding photographs, but more precise, like a blueprint revisited and redrawn with the lessons of load-bearing. Ian Archer's profile, those careful brows, the nose that always looked like it was deciding between mercy and logic, caught the chandelier light and sent it back into the room in narrow, accidental spears. He didn't smile. He didn't look at me first. He looked at Mara, as if the miles between then and now had collapsed into a final step he hadn't wanted to take, but had chosen anyway. "It's you," she said again, softer, the words detaching from her like buttons coming loose. The semicircle around her rearranged itself into a different geometry, the kind crowds make when they realize the scene in front of them has a backstory, and they want to be present for the footnotes. The driver opened the rear door. Ian stood, tall but thinner, the way men get when they've learned how to carry regret without bending. He wore a dark suit, shirt unbuttoned at the throat, no tie. He looked like someone who had canceled a dinner with himself in order to be here. "Hello, Mara," he said. The sound of his voice did not belong to the past. It belonged to a city at night, quiet but full of distant movement. Her chin lifted a fraction, automatic bravado scrambling into position. "You look different." "I am," he said. Then he turned to me, and the entire room pivoted with him. And in that moment, every photograph ever taken of me in gym bleachers and cafeteria lines and wide, yawning hallways seemed to stand up and pay attention. Emily, he said, and there it was, the gentleness I remembered. The one I'd suspected was a trick until life convinced me that some people learn their own softness. Too late to use it right the first time. He took a step closer, not reaching, not performing. Thank you for coming. I almost laughed. As if he had invited me here, as if this night belonged to him. But I understood what he meant. Thank you for staying alive in a world where it would have been easy to vanish. Rowan stepped from the far side of the car, closing the door with his palm as if sound itself were a thing he could moderate. The sight of him was a relief my body recognized before my thoughts did. Tension, leaving the muscles along my spine like rain leaving a roofline. He wore the navy suit I loved because it made the blue in his eyes confess its own temperature. And his smile was small and private for me alone. He fell into step at Ian's shoulder. And for a flicker of a second I saw the two men as two versions of a city. The one you plan on a whiteboard and the one you inhabit with a key in your hand. Mara saw him too. Her gaze skittered from Ian's face to Rowan's and back again, trying to make a single shape out of two separate facts. Her mouth parted. I don't understand. Why are you together? We're not, I said, and the room tightened in the way rooms do when disappointment and curiosity touch palms. We're here for the same reason, but not the reason you think. Ian nodded once, as if we'd rehearsed, which we hadn't. Not precisely. I asked for 15 minutes, he said to me. I'll take 10, you'll take 5, Rowan said mildly, which made me want to kiss him in front of the entire class of 2OXX and every ghost of every hallway we'd ever walked. She can give you 5. Ian accepted that boundary with a quick dip of his head. It was new, this readiness to be smaller than his habit. I wondered who had taught it to him and whether the cost had been worth the lesson. We moved to the edge of the ballroom, near a bank of windows that looked out over the oaks. The DJ, misreading the collective breathlessness as permission, put on a song with a beat like an expensive heart. People pretended to dance. People are diligent that way. Mara followed, unable to resist a stage that had unfurled itself without her sewing a single seam. If this is about the past, she said brightly, I think we all made choices we regret. We were young, we were cruel, Ian corrected. And a delicate hush fell over the syllables like snow settling on a fence. He let the sentence stand there for a moment, then continued, I owe you both an apology. But they are not the same apology, Mara. I let your need for attention feel like proof that love was happening. It wasn't. It was only happening to you. And Emily, he looked at me squarely, not flinching from the bruise we both remembered. I mistook faintness for fattedness. I took the easier story. I am sorry. The apology was thorough without being theatrical. It didn't try to smuggle in a plea. I wanted to distrust it just to keep faith with the girl I'd been. The one who packed her life into two garbage bags and walked away from a courtyard swollen with wisteria, as if the very flowers were witnesses she couldn't stand. But there's a difference between carrying your history and wearing it like armor. I have learned to tell it. Thank you, I said. It felt like setting down a brick. Apology accepted. Mara laughed, a thin metal sound. Is that it? You show up in a car like a movie and say sorry, and she waved a hand toward me, like a hostess showing a guest an ordinary chair. She just accepts because it's not the point, Rowan said in that easy voice that makes people put down whatever weapons they were polishing. Tonight isn't a court, it's a mirror. Mara bristled, but curiosity kept her in the scene. A mirror of what? Of what happens when we stop pretending old thefts are current currency, I said. You stole a life you couldn't live in. It's time to return it. Her smile faltered. Return what, Ian? I don't even want. Not a man, I said. A narrative. Ian exhaled, something like relief and something like dread mixed in the same breath. He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and drew out a slim, matte black envelope. Even the paper looked expensive, the way certain materials seemed to have been taught to behave well in public. He held it out to Mara. "What is it?" she asked, not taking it. "The ownership transfer," he said, "of the fund I set up after the sale. I registered the name in a hurry. I should have asked permission." He looked at me again, and the apology reappeared, not redundant but recursive apologies within apologies. It was called the Mara Trust. It made for good headlines when I was trying to distinguish the act from the accusations. I have wanted for some time to correct that. It belongs to Emily now. In name and direction, the room, though it could not hear him, felt the voltage shift. Money is a language. Even the illiterate recognize its cadence. I stared at the envelope, then at the man who had once placed a ring in my hand, then at the woman who had slipped that ring into her own and told herself it was the same story. "I don't want your penance," I said. My voice surprised me. It was neither hard nor forgiving. It was simply mine. "I have my own company. I have capital. I have work to do. It isn't penance," Ian said. He smiled without showing his teeth the way you do when you are trying to appear less like a predator and more like a person. It's a correction. The trust was meant to fund founders who build things that return time to people who don't have enough of it. It is your thesis, not mine. It should bear your name because the idea came from you on a Tuesday afternoon in a bad chair, when you told me what work should do. Take it and rename it, or take it and shutter it, but make the choice in your own handwriting. He offered the envelope again. This time I took it, not because I needed what was inside, but because sometimes closure requires a physical artifact the way grief needs a showbox and joy needs a receipt. "Thank you," I said once more, and it was different than the first. "Thank you," fuller, as if the word had discovered a room behind itself. I slipped the envelope into my bag. Mara's face had gone pale, the red dress more emergency now than a signal. "So that's why you came," she said to Ian and then to me, "and that's why you called him your love. Because money is your boyfriend. Congratulations, you win." I shook my head. "I wasn't calling Ian," I said. "I was calling Rowan, and I didn't say it to win. I said it to remind myself that I already have everything I came here to find." She blinked, slow, as if her lashes were heavy with rain. "Then why drag me through this? What is this performance?" "It isn't a performance," Rowan said, and his gentleness made the words sharper. "It's a release from all sides." The DJ, either clairvoyant or lucky, changed the track to something quieter. Violins curling around the room like breath on glass. People began to remember the old versions of themselves they had intended to play tonight, and drifted back to them, grateful to be assigned lines that didn't require improvisation. I looked at my sister then. Really looked past the paint and the angles and the hunger dressed in couture. I saw the child who had watched our mother press powder onto her cheekbones and say, "Careful, love. The world prefers a story it already knows." I saw the teenager who turned compliments into rations because she never knew when the next one would arrive. I saw the woman who gathered men like hall passes and still never felt permitted. "Mara," I said softly, "you can stop running now." Her mouth trembled. "Into what?" "Into yourself," I said. "It's the only room that doesn't lock you out." For a second I thought she would spit. For a second I thought she would fold right there, literal as laundry. Instead she squared her shoulders, the old performance stumbling back onto stage. "Enjoy your little triumph," she said, louder for the witnesses. "I have nothing to prove. That," I said, "is a start." Ian stepped back, as if we had reached the border of his usefulness. 5 minutes, he said to Rowan, who nodded. "Thank you for the loan." He faced me one last time. "If you ever want to talk, I know where to find your inbox," I said, and we both smiled, a small, civilized thing between people who once tried to move a mountain with their bare hands and learned better tools. He returned to the car. The driver closed his door, the engine murmured its low, private song, and then the black car slid away, taking with it a portion of the past that no longer required a seat at my table. Rowan's hand found the inside of my elbow. The touch steadied me more than I wanted to admit. "How are you?" he asked. So quietly the question belonged only to us. Exact, I said. We stood at the window together, watching the oak leaves stipple the parking lot lights into a pattern that looked like a map of somewhere we could choose. Behind us, laughter resumed its ordinary shape. A waiter appeared with a tray of champagne that sweated like it had been running. I took a glass. Mara didn't come outside with me, I said to Rowan. I want air that hasn't been inside someone else first. We stepped into the night. The late summer heat had a softness to it, like a bruise you could press without pain. Crickets argued the way families do when they still believe they might change each other's minds. The moon was a coin someone had forgotten to spend. I didn't know he would say that, Rowan said after a while. I didn't either. I touched the bag where the envelope now lived, a thin, dense possibility. But I knew he would come exactly as he is now, and that it would be enough. And your sister, she'll learn or she won't, I said. Either way, it's not my test anymore. We walked the curve of the drive and stopped where the hedges hid us from the bright, prosperous windows. I leaned into Rowan's shoulder and let the weight of the evening distribute itself. He breathed in, slow. I matched him. It felt like calibrating. Dance with me, he said. There's no music. There is, he said. You just can't hear it from inside. So we danced, no steps, no witnesses. Just a sway that felt like proof, and for the first time in a long time, the ground under my feet did not threaten to open. It offered itself, steady as a vow I could make and keep. Inside, I knew the reunion would reconstruct itself around new gossip, newer drinks, a slideshow of faces that once believed high school was a planet rather than a launch pad. But out here, there were only the two of us and the sound of leaves learning their late August language. Out here, I could feel the story I'd come to rewrite settle into its final punctuation, not a period, a door. In the week after the reunion, the envelope sat on my kitchen counter like a small, disciplined thundercloud. I didn't open it right away. I cooked. I went to the office. I reviewed roadmaps and hiring packets and designed specs that smelled like ambition warmed through. At night, I slept the way scaffolding rests when the workers go home upright, purposeful, unfinished. On Friday, when the light coming in off the river made the counter look like a clean page, I slid a knife along the envelope seam. The documents were sparse and exact, a transfer executed, a board resolution attached, a cover note in Ian's slanted hand. Thank you for correcting what I couldn't. I poured coffee, read it twice, and then called legal. By Monday, the fund had a new name. We called it the Room of Time. Not a charity, not a trophy cabinet hand engine. Grants and tiny, patient checks for founders who built tools that returned hours to people who never got to choose how theirs were spent. Nurses mapping silent inefficiencies. Single parents automating the errands that eat their lives. Teachers harvesting a few minutes back from bureaucracies that we pretend are inevitable. We added a line to the charter that made me cry alone at my desk. Every investment must demonstrate not just growth, but the restoration of dignity measured in minutes. When the press called, I gave sentences that would survive being quoted by people in a hurry. I didn't mention the reunion or the red dress or the envelope. Stories turned feral in the wild. I kept mine on a leash. Mara texted 3 days after the announcement broke. It has a nice name. She wrote, did you pick it? I typed and deleted a dozen replies, each one a performance for an audience I didn't want to court. In the end, I sent, yes, if you ever want to build something with your own name on it, I'll read the deck. She didn't answer that day. She didn't answer the next. But on Sunday night, when the city clicked off its jewelry and washed its face, she called. Her voice was raw around the edges, unpainted. I don't know how to build anything, she said. You build survivals, I said. Those are architectures, too. Start with one small room. Ask what it's for. Make it honest. What if I fail? Then you learn the shape of the floor, I said. And that's not nothing. We didn't say sorry. We didn't rewind. We let the past stay shelved where it belonged, and spoke like women who were not auditioning for each other anymore. When we hung up, the apartment felt bigger, the kind of bigger that comes from subtraction. Rowan took me to the river that night because he understands that water is my first language. We sat on the quay, shoes off, ankles telling the tide. Secrets. He handed me a tiny box, plain wood, no hinge. Inside was a key no larger than my thumb. Old brass, teeth worn smooth from some other lock in some other life. It's not for a door. He said, it's for a day. Use it when a day needs opening. I don't need a ring to prove anything, I said. I know, he smiled. That's why I'm not offering one, not yet. We can be exact at any speed we choose. We didn't make promises shaped like property. We made an itinerary, mornings together more often than not. A map of places where our work intersected. A vow to ask good questions before we built the platforms that would hold our answers. We drew a line across our calendar in pencil and named it someday. The fund's first proposal came from a woman named Salma who had written her application on her phone. Between double shifts, she'd built a prototype, a humble script that turned hospital supply lists into smart routes for understaffed aides, saving 7 minutes around, which meant 3 extra patient conversations in a night, which meant a loneliness abated you couldn't put in a spreadsheet but could feel when you looked at the faces in the morning. We sent her a check and a note. We believe you, she called crying from a bus and said, no one has ever given me money without asking me to become smaller first. I went into the stairwell and cried too. Months unfold quickly when you measure them in minutes reclaimed. Our boardroom acquired a new softness, whiteboards crowded with sketches of lives made roomier. A basket near the door full of phones we asked visitors to drop in as a ritual. A tiny ceremony proving our thesis before we even began. I hired a program manager who kept time not with a stopwatch but with a listening face. We ran pilot after pilot. And when an idea didn't work, we wrote down why in a book we kept on a high shelf and called the Museum of Wrong Turns. Sometimes we gave tours. Sometimes we laughed so long in those aisles we forgot to be afraid. Ian wrote twice, once to say he liked the name, once to send us a founder he'd met on a flight. A teacher building a tool to help kids without laptops practice typing on paper handouts that would later scan themselves into assignments. We funded her too. I learned how to hold gratitude without letting it redecorate my boundaries. And Mara, she tried, faltered, tried again. Her first deck looked like perfume ads, all gloss, no grease. I told her that. She didn't hang up. She found an accountant who had once worked 2 jobs and a designer who understood billboards, and a retired city planner who loved buses more than he loved most people. She built a microfellowship for women leaving marriages without bank accounts. The grants were small but real. The workshops were held in church basements that smelled like coffee and old prayer. She sent me photos, faces not fixed into lesson book smiles but lit the way rooms are when you finally find the switch. On the anniversary of the reunion, the country club sent a mass email asking for updated contact info and photos. We were proud of. I deleted it. I didn't need new pictures to prove I'd learned how to stand in my own life. That night I walked the city with Rowan, early autumn. Streetlights doing their best impression of stars. A bakery had dumped powdered sugar on the sidewalk. My shoes left faint constellations behind us. We didn't talk about work or money or the past shape-shifting. We pointed at dogs. We eavesdropped onto teenagers arguing over a lyric. We stopped to buy a peach from a vendor closing up, and ate it over a trash can like feral millionaires. On the bridge we'd claimed as ours, the one that looks ordinary until you stand in the center and realize it's humming. We stopped. Wind threaded my hair out of its knot. Rowan put his forehead against mine. You look like the future, he said. I look like the present, I corrected. Finally, below us the river kept doing its patient, muscular work, making a path through city and silt without asking permission. I thought of my mother powdering her cheekbones, telling us the world preferred a story it already knew. I thought of the girl I used to be holding a pawnshop receipt like a ripped passport. I thought of Mara standing at the ballroom window, seeing herself the way I wanted, not as a villain, not as a caution sign, but as a woman who might yet learn a different choreography. Rowan's palm found my back. The weight was light and exactly enough. Ready? He asked. For what? For going on, he said, not as spectacle, as practice. We walked home. We passed a store with a display of old keys in a glass bowl labeled, "Each opens something." I bought one just because at my apartment door I used the right key, the present tense one. The one that works inside. The counter was clean, the knife was washed, the envelope was gone, filed and finished. I set the new key next to Rowan's wooden box. I wrote a single note on a sticky square and pressed it to the fridge, where I would see it every morning: build rooms, return time, choose the truest door. Then I turned off the lights, the city laying its quiet hands against our windows, and went to bed with the man who understood that love is not a courtroom, not a yacht, not a performance in a red dress. It is a calendar you fill together with hours you agree to keep sacred. I slept without rehearsing any speeches. In the morning, when the sky loosened into its pale blue and the coffee gurgled like a small, good machine, my phone vibrated. A text from Mara, first cohort filled, full of women who remind me of us. Thank you for the room. I smiled and typed back, keep the door open. We locked nothing that needed air. We kept what mattered and gave away what didn't. And when people asked for the ending, I told them the truth. There isn't one. There's only this: mornings that aren't borrowed, work that makes your hands feel necessary, and a love that holds your face still only when the world is too bright with the future you chose. I picked up Rowan's key, pocketed it like a charm, and left for the office in a city we were still learning to deserve. The ground didn't open. It steadied. I stepped forward. The door did what doors do. It opened.